for a bit. Here we go. Yeah, so thanks for joining us. Really good to see some familiar faces again and some new faces too. Good stuff. Hello, Rachel. Are you right? I don't think I said hello to you. Good to see you. So today we have some fantastic speakers again. So Padraig Hyland, an old associate, friend, kind of colleague of mine from years ago. I've always been inspired by Padraig. He's always had some fantastic stories to tell and nuggets of information and leadership, and is a general good egg. So really pleased to have Padraig on board today to talk about storytelling. We've got plenty of stories from where we used to meet as well, but that's a different story. And Clare, great to see you again. Clare's really pleased to have Clare as kind of the Edge team now, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely.
You're kind of becoming part of the Woodward, and I love that. It's brilliant. And the session you did last week, moderated last week on our panel discussion, was fantastic. So
thank you.
If I'm going to take advice from anyone on presentation, it's definitely going to be Clare. So we're going to kick off this morning with this afternoon with Padraig. He's going to talk to us about storytelling and how to kind of improve that sales journey and how to tweak your elevator pitch and all those things that are associated with sales, marketing, and general business development. Over to you, Mr. Padraig.
Okay, thank you, Tudor. Hi, everybody. I should probably start with a story that kind of introduces who I am. So, Cash here has mentioned Chicago, so I'm going to tell you a story about an experience I had in Chicago, probably about 15 years ago now, or more maybe. But what you might not know about me, I work in business. We have a coaching and consulting business. But I also spent 7 years as a stand-up comic. I was a professional stand-up comic for a number of years, mostly in the UK actually. But the first ever few gigs I ever did were in Chicago. And I would have been a pretty good presenter. I had a self-opinion of myself. I was an amazing presenter. And in business, I used to do okay. I'd be the guy that had kind of, somebody had to do a presentation, I'd be pushed out. You go do it. You're comfortable doing this stuff. You're good at this stuff or whatever. And then I did this stand-up comedy gig, one of the first ones I ever did, and in this small little venue in Chicago. And I went on and I thought, I've got this covered. I know how people respond to stuff. And then I started into my, whatever I was doing. I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember all I had was 5 minutes. This 5 minutes felt like about an hour. It very quickly became apparent that I wasn't connecting with this audience at all. And it just was like tumbleweed across the stage. It was a very awkward moment. Anyway, subsequent to that, I went on to become a professional stand-up comic, and I spent, you learn a lot when you're doing comedy about telling stories and crafting jokes and a lot of other things. But one of the things you learn about is how to engage an audience. And I used to reflect, like, what was the difference? How come I could be so good at engaging a business audience, but I just had no skills whatsoever for this new place? And what I discovered was the key difference between a business audience and a comic audience was the compliance. In the business world, we all show up, we're on this call, we're here to listen. There's a high degree of compliance. And indeed, a low level of expectation sometimes. Now, you guys obviously are different, high expectations. In the comedy or any performance world, there's a high degree of expectation and quite often a low degree of compliance. If you're in a Jongleurs on a Friday night in Leeds, there's this like a really low level of compliance. You've got 5 or 6 hen nights and maybe a couple of stags, and nobody's listening. So what I learned in stand-up was this idea of how do you engage an audience? Now, interestingly, when I came back into business, something had changed really quite dramatically. And that was that audiences in business all of a sudden had higher expectations. They wouldn't sit through the boring stuff like they used to. They also had less reverence for people. When I started out, if the CEO walked out on the main floor, whatever, we'd all be hanging off his breath or her breath. Or, we were so reverent to authority, and was all of that's going, it's gone. So leaders or salespeople or whoever you are in business, your audience has moved on. They're not as compliant as they used to be. And what that means is you need to be able to engage them a little bit more. You need to be able to not only engage, but grab their attention and then keep rewarding it so you can keep it. So this is where story comes in. And a lot of the work we do is helping leaders in sales and anybody in business who is trying to engage an excited group or individuals or customers or consumers. And we would work with like Heineken, Paddy Power, all sorts of organizations on this kind of stuff. So what I thought I'd do today is I thought I would take you through a kind of a few insights on story. And then if you have any questions that are specific to you, I'd love to answer them. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a couple of slides, not a lot. It's not going to be heavy, I promise. There we go, share that. Ta-da. Oh, a bit of luck, this will work. Oh, is everybody seeing a screen? Everybody see slides?
Yeah, that looks good.
Great. Sorry, I won't go do that. So I'll talk you through this. This is a horse's head. Everybody see that? So it's a plastic horse's head. It's not a threat. The type of thing, if you found in your bed in the morning, you wouldn't feel scared. It's just a little plastic horse's head. It's what you might call a piece of junk, in actual fact. And you buy this at a shop that, you know, probably sells a lot of other junk cars. In America, you call it car boot sale or whatever. It's the type of thing you kind of wonder, it's a knick-knack or whatever. But there was a couple of guys a few years ago, and they carried out this experiment called the significant objects experiment. And they just bought a load of junk, right? The two guys were called Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn. And they spent $129 with an average cost of $125 per piece of junk. This particular horse's head was bought for 99 cents. And they bought them on eBay. And then they got a load of people, writers, to write a story on each one of them. And then what did they do? They popped them back up on eBay. And guess what happened? They sold them for a shed load more than they put them up for, than they bought them for. So this particular horse's head sold for almost $63, over 6,000% increase in its value. And they made $8,000 in total out of their $129 spend. So why do I mention it? So the power of story is that it changes meaning. And all the difference between these knickknacks between before and after was the story that was written. That's all. But if you can change what something means to a human, you can change the value of it. You can change how they interpret and how they relate to it. If you're in sales, what you're doing in a lot of cases is you're taking a product that mightn't be that exciting, but giving it a slightly different meaning, or a meaning that they can connect with, that they will value. So story is really powerful in that. And in actual fact, you can only deliver a change of meaning using story. I know there's a lot of, we try and talk people into the value of something. But if you really tell a great story that changes their meaning, it'll access the heart. It's really powerful. So that's one of the key benefits of why you need to be telling story in business. The next thing I'm going to tell you is another aspect of story. I'm going to tell you a really short story that Ernest Hemingway is very famous for. It's only got 6 words. So I'm going to tell you the story. The story goes like this. For sale, baby's shoes, never worn. So when you tell that, and I've told that to lots and lots of groups, everybody goes, well, somebody goes, oh my God, that poor mother. Because somebody went there. Somebody else is going, well, they just got the wrong shoes at where they bought it online. You know, somebody thought they were expecting a boy, but they had a girl and they bought all the wrong stuff or whatever it was. In other words, with those 6 words, you as a human being made sense of the story. You made it into a story. So a key point here is, if you're not making the story for your customer, they will make the story. And the story already exists. There is a story about who you are and your product, and all of that exists already. You could be calling somebody up and all you are to them is a nuisance, or you are the bringer of light. Who knows? But there's a story there. And so key point is, humans will make story out of everything. And then the second point I'd like to make about it, in the context of using story, you only need to give a few words and humans will make a story out of it. And in other words, the amount of content, if I had to write up that story, it would take me a long time to write it up. It would take me a long time to tell it. But if you pick the right words, you can tell a really concise story, but it works like an analogy. In other words, when you use an analogy, what you're really doing is accessing what the human being knows already, what that person knows already. And you bring in what could be a very complex idea. And because they have an analogy they can relate it to, boom, everything falls into place. Stories like that. You give a very short number of words. What you're doing is you're accessing all the content they have in their head. So stories are a really effective way of getting a huge amount of information across in a very short period. Really important at times. Now, I feel like everybody likes the cake. So the first couple of insights were more about story in general that are applied to business. This is more about how storytelling happens in business. We all like a chocolate cake. But in business, for whatever reason, we don't give people the chocolate cake. So when it comes to communicating our product or our service, and quite often when we're in a sales call even, we're giving our customer ingredients. We're saying, here, have some flour, see what it tastes like. It doesn't taste very nice. We're giving them ingredients. What they want is a cake. And what do I mean by this? What I mean is we're sitting in front of people, we're talking about what we do, and what we're doing for other people, what our product does, and how it's different, da, da, da. We haven't baked the cake. We're giving them ingredients. So you need the cake, you need the ingredients, don't get me wrong, and there is a time to talk about those things. But when you're engaging somebody, what you really have to do is give them the cake. In other words, tell them a story that they can see themselves in, a story that has value to them, that they can relate to. Then you can talk about your ingredients a little bit later on, but you got to give them the cake first. Now in business, for whatever reason, we just don't seem to bake the cake a lot. So that's the other thing with story. Story is how you bake the cake. Finally, I'm just going to talk about a few things to do with big stories and little stories. In the business world, there are big stories and little stories. And the big stories relate to what companies need to have figured out. They're like, these are more strategic. They're like your culture story, your strategy story, or your value story. That last one in particular impacts sales and marketing quite a bit because if the customer doesn't know who they are and how they want to relate to and what kind of value they're giving a client or their customers, then it's really difficult for salespeople or marketing to figure it out for the company, or can be difficult. So these are kind of strategic stories that we often work with organizations to figure out. But they're not often the stories you would tell in themselves. These are about getting clarity and alignment and authenticity. In other words, an organization needs to tell a story that's really clear, aligned across its whole organization, and needs to be authentic to who they are. And then the little stories are the stories we use in the everyday. And these are falling out of your big story, but they're just an element of it. And these are the anecdotes we would use, and we'd use them to connect with a particular client or whatever. They're short, they're far more engaging, they're more exciting, and we can get really into storytelling when we do these. These stories would, in particular, I'll put it in the sales context. You need to know which stories to use at which point. In the early part of a sale, you're probably telling some value stories. As you get closer towards the end, you need to be using stories that maybe drive closure. And so there is a difference. Really good salespeople, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously, know when to use the right story. And it's based on what they're trying to do with the customer at the time. And a lot of sales is around bringing the client on a kind of a heady journey of decision making. You know, oh, you're here and now you need to understand this and then we'll get you there and da da da. Whereas, you know, all good salespeople, I'm looking at Cash there smiling, he's a good sales guy. They know that these journeys are emotional journeys. Every decision is an emotional decision, and then we'll justify it afterwards. So story is a great way to bring people on that emotional journey along the pipeline, and know which stories do what for you as you go along. And good salespeople have them. So yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about on the story front. I'll stop sharing. You can stop sharing.
Unmute myself. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's it really.
I I love the cake analogy to Cash, because it's like too often we just kind of like give information, don't we? Like just present rather than give.
Well, the reason I'm nodding so furiously is what I'm doing now is I'll probably tell Padraig, is organizing a large scale event, which because of the regulatory environment to COVID is, you know, potentially being wiped off the map. So we've tried to introduce digital. But our digital offering is not as strong as a standalone digital offering to some media companies out there, so essentially a trade show. So I was speaking to a client today, and the words I said, but look, the event is the cake. You come to me because you want a chocolate gatto. That's what you want. It's the cherry on top. That's digital. You know, and she was like, she chuckled and she, you know, kind of laughed. But if I would have started going down some long convoluted story about, you know, but we're a trade show, we focus on face-to-face meetings and digital's not the route for you. I just needed to get her to see something. So now she goes, the event's the cake. The digital piece is just the cherry. But I didn't walk into the shop for the cherry. I want the cake. I need the cake with the cherry on top. And that was basically, and that's why I was laughing so much. It was literally perfect.
Yeah. You could do so much with cake analogies. It's unbelievable.
People love cake. Who doesn't love cake?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of cake being eaten right now, particularly in our house. And digested biscuits.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good product. Superb.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. That was really good. Claire, are you okay? You had a few technical issues.
Yeah, everything just froze and it did that whirligig thing. And I was thinking, this isn't going to work. So yeah, apologies. Somebody was using my computer this morning. So there will be words. Teenager.
That does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll kick off with Claire. What we normally do, guys, is keep questions for at the end of the last session, just to kind of manage time a bit. We normally call the bell at 1:15. So we normally the theoretical finish time is 1:15, but you're welcome to hang around, and we normally get caught in different discussions and ask and have a bit of a Q&A as well, and that's where the juicy topics come out as well. So you're more than welcome to hang around, but 1:15, if you need to head, that's absolutely fine. And any questions to the speakers, either you can ping them directly to me through the chat, or put them to the group or to Charlie, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and then we can fire them through. All right. So yeah, no such thing as a bad questions. Feel free to fire them through. Without further ado, I will take you over to the lovely Forestier. Forestier.
Forestier. You can't say it, can you? It's fine.
It's one of those mental things.
Don't worry, it's fine. So yeah, hello everybody. I had done a little intro in the chat, but basically I do emceeing and I teach people how to do better presentations. And I do all that because I was a broadcast journalist for 20 years. So I think that sort of taught me the hard way how to engage audiences. So that's the kind of stuff I will be sharing with you. So to start off with, there is apparently now a hashtag for Zoom fatigue. And I want to give you a few tips so that hopefully your presentation, your talk, your sales pitch, whatever, doesn't start trending in the Zoom fatigue hashtag. That would not be good. So why are people getting zoomed out? Obviously, they're going to lots of virtual meetings and events, so that obviously doesn't help. But they're also managing to watch a lot of Netflix, and they're not getting Netflix out, are they? That isn't a hashtag yet, I don't think. But of course, that's because the shows and the movies that they're watching are really entertaining and engaging and exciting, and they're choosing things that they're interested in to watch. But could you say the same thing about all the virtual events that we're attending? Apart from this one, no, you couldn't. So how do we stop that? How do we make sure that the people we talk to are not getting Zoom fatigue, that they are actually engaging us? We are engaging our prospects, our audience, anyone that we're talking to online. So if you heard my last talk here at the Edge seminar, I spoke about the way you can present yourself, and that's obviously a massive part of it. You know, anything that makes you easier to look at and to watch will help people to engage with you. So it's an almost kind of, you know, the basics that you should be doing. And, you know, I mentioned them, but it's frame yourself properly, light yourself properly, bring your A game to these meetings. You should feel a little bit knackered at the end of it. Really up your performance, keep the energy as high as you can. If you didn't see my last one, you know, email Tudor and insist he sends you the recording as soon as possible, or check out my LinkedIn videos where I witter on about this sort of thing all the time. But I'm going to talk today about adapting your content for this virtual audience, because we just can't churn out the same kind of stuff we would be doing if we were online. The audience is different because the situation is different. So the first thing you have to do is really think about the people listening. They're still your target audience, so hopefully you know if that's a sales pitch you're doing, but their issues and concerns are a little bit different now. A lot of that is going to depend, obviously, on how their industry is being affected by COVID. But even so, people's priorities are shifting a lot at the moment in all sorts of ways. Now, you need to find that out and direct your content, obviously. And, you know, some stuff might jar that you might normally have said. I'm sure you'll think about these things, but sometimes they get forgotten. But generally, we do know that everyone we are talking to is sitting on a lot more virtual calls, or are sitting on a lot more virtual calls. They're doing events and meetings during the day. And then, as I said, they're probably watching a lot more telly during the evenings. So we need to bring a lot more to the party. We need to adjust and tweak what we're going to say to get it right, to really engage them and get the right point, the right sort of message that they're going to listen to what you have to say and finish the meeting and then go off and do whatever it is that you wanted them to do after listening to you. So you have to remember there are a few things working against you when you're talking online. The tech does deaden you. It can literally suck the life, the energy out of you. People can't read as well the little social cues that they would get from you if you were in the room with them. You know, nervous energy, confidence, humor, all these kind of things, the little subtle clues that we just check subconsciously and notice about somebody and make judgments about, they are missing online. And actually some of your sentences can literally disappear too, thanks to Wi-Fi. So that is something you have to bear in mind. You need to fight against that and bring a little bit more. Now, one of the things I'm doing, I'm only talking for 10 or 15 minutes today, and that's because I know that a key way to ensure people will switch off is if we talk for too long. And that's even more the case online, where we have lots of other things to do. You know, I can write a blog, text my husband, check out those shoes, all while I'm doing a virtual meeting. And if I just keep looking in the camera, you might not even know I'm doing it. I'm not doing it now. I'm not that good at multitasking, but you know what I mean. So my message here is keep it simple, keep it short, keep it bite-sized for our ever-shortening attention spans. You need to make sure it's really rehearsed, really engaged, and you're giving some variety. You're keeping things varied. Now, if you use slides, I don't generally, because I literally have no faith in my abilities to get them to work. But if you do use them, keep them to just a few bullet points per slide, just a simple message, be concise. What is true for a live presentation, as I said, is doubly true for online presentations. You need to keep the message and the points brisk. Use short sentences. Think, you know, short truly is sweet. And so definitely, if you're the kind of person who might run a 2-hour live workshop, you know, make that 60 minutes online. Shorten the session as much as possible. If you are a guest and the organizer's having you on, you know, consider what they're trying to do and suggest that maybe the organizer shortens it too. So it's worth, oh, there's a massive argument going on in the background between teenager and husband. We'll just gloss over that if you can hear that. In-person live events, weirdly, are made up of 50% non-verbal and only social interaction. And you're not going to get that online. So don't need to add it in. You can take that time out, unless, you know, you're on one of these fancy schmancy conference platforms that actually have networking functions that you can use. Anyway, I digress. So back to today, this platform, Zoom, you have Padraig for a bit and some questions, then you have me with a little bit of banter and chat in the beginning. It's simple, it's quick, it's varied. You obviously planned it all this way, Tudor, right? No, Tudor?
Of course, yeah.
Of course you did. Of course you did. That's it. Well, I'm making a point by bringing Tudor in then. But hopefully by compressing the content, it is going to leave people really hungry for more. They are going to, essentially, after they've listened to you, they are going to hopefully go away and do what you want, but they're going to like you, they're going to refer from you, they're going to buy from you, they're going to come back next time for more, they're going to follow and engage with you because you gave them these little teasers about yourself. I meant to ask as well, please be writing down any questions that you might have for me in the chat box. I think, as Tudor said, no question is too stupid. If you're thinking it, then somebody else probably is too, but please keep it clean, Martin. Now, my message to you is to be lively. Now, that seems obvious, but it's a harder thing to do. And it needs to be lively also in the things that you say too. So, you know, don't be dull and monotone and recite endless facts at people. Don't read out what they can clearly see on the screen. If your PowerPoint says words, you don't need to repeat those words back to them. Things as well, like modulate your voice slightly differently, change your speech rhythms, throw in a silly joke, you know, something about Martin like I just did, whatever's going to work, obviously, for your personality and the relationships that you might have with the people on the call. But the key is you're trying to be a little bit unpredictable. You're trying to keep things lively and people staying connected and piquing their attention or making their ears prick up and listen to something. So again, the other thing that can help with variety is to call on people. It is incredibly easy to check out in an online meeting. You should try and not go more than 5 minutes actually without asking a question or slightly breaking from what you're saying. Even if, you know, like I just did, say, can you write some questions down in a chat box? Or if I had a question for you, could you put your answers quickly in the chat box? You can call on someone specific, then that person has to pay attention, and then everybody else thinks, oh my God, she might call on me in a minute, I better listen. Obviously not always appropriate, but you can, you know, I just did it because nobody wants to be the person who isn't ready and fumbles the mute button and has to say, sorry, what are you talking to me? You know, like I just made poor old Tudor do. Sorry, Tudor, to use you as my patsy. But now you're all thinking, oh my God, she might say something to me. She might comment about me. And that keeps you more alert. And these are all little tricks that you need to do when our attention spans are so short. Now, if you have got a load of really dull facts, I said earlier, don't use them. Think about sending them to the audience ahead of time. Obviously not always appropriate, but a meeting can go so much better if you're not covering really complicated information points for the first time, but you're maybe going a bit deeper. This could be really relevant if you're introducing a new solution or a concept to people. Now, I said be lively, and I also mean be interesting. And that means give out the information or deliver the content in a way that is going to make people have those aha moments. Now, we just had that example from Cash where that happened with the client he was talking to. And obviously this is what Padraig has been talking about. It is telling a story with what you say. Now, one tip is to remember that the most useful word in the English language is imagine. If you chuck that into the beginning of a sentence, people generally can't help but imagine what you're saying. I think it's all to do with neurolinguistic programming and things like that. But, you know, like imagine you're going for a walk today and you will just start to imagine your daily walk. So it's a very clever way to quickly start painting a picture. And you know, you're painting these pictures, you're telling these stories with words, with the wonderful English language. You know, you use all the allegories, the similes, the metaphors. I mean, essentially, apologies to everyone who's Welsh, but we just jokingly say that Wales only exists so that we can use it as a simile. You know, such and such is about as big as Wales. I'm teasing, obviously, but the point is made. The next thing to do, or to do constantly, is to interrupt your own flow. So I suddenly asked questions. I said, I'll put some questions in the chat box. I made comments to Tudor, which forced a little detour. I whittled on about the alternative event platform where it has networking functions. So interrupting the flow stops, it makes you tell a story, it makes you explain a side point. It gets anyone who might be quietly doing the weekly shop online while you talk to look up and pay attention. Now, you can digress on purpose yourself with oh yes, when it comes to keeping it short, I meant to tell you, I was in a webinar last week when the speaker sent himself to sleep, he was so boring. Now, this kind of thing, we're switching and changing, the tone, it makes your voice change as well. It might wake people up, literally, and help make you more of a human contact, not just like a presenting avatar with a really perfect scripted speech. And that's another message, really. Don't worry if you do deviate a little bit from your perfectly made presentation slides and your perfectly scripted speech. It makes you hopefully look more human and feel more real. And then naturally, as human beings, we engage with real people. So this is all going to help. Now, on a technical note, actually, well, I was talking about slides. I know slides are not technical, but as I said, I don't like using them. I dread those sort of things, the technology going wrong. But it is a message to consider when you are presenting online, is don't try to be too clever and too technical, because you can end up becoming a bit of a slave, really, to all the fancy slides and the clever stuff. And that can distract, and if it all goes wrong, then you're really screwed, aren't you? So if you insist on using all this, please rehearse, please practice, please make sure the system really works, the slides work, the sound, if you've got them in your slides, works. And I would really suggest that you avoid movies and sound recordings and things like that, because most people's Wi-Fi is just not gonna accept it, and you're gonna get glitches. If you've got pictures on your presentation slides, you compress them to reduce the file size, she says, and the bandwidth. Not really know how to do that, but that's what I know you have to do. And that again reduces the risk of freezing or any unresponsive connections. You are just trying to do as much as you can to make it trouble-free. Otherwise, that will put you off. It will make it distracting people. They will get bored, and they will switch off and do all the things I've suggested that people do online, and worse, probably while you're talking. So yeah, I mentioned sound there. That is a point. This is probably a bugbear of mine, but I know it's going to affect so many people. Sort out your own sound when you are talking to people. Just a standard mic headphone thingy like I'm using. Sometimes when I'm recording videos, I don't want to have my headphones in because it looks a bit weird, so I just literally clip my microphone bit here with a bit of sticky tape or something. I've got some hair clips if I can find them that I clip it onto. So you know, maybe if I wanted to take my headphones out while I'm talking because it might distract me, I don't need to do that because I'm clipped on here, and you can still hear me really well. Probably not when I'm playing with it with my hands. There you go. The idea is that if you are sounding crap and echoey and I can't hear you very well, I'm more likely to switch off. And everybody's ears are different. Everyone's sound is different. You know, some people are really hard of hearing and we don't even know it. So I think you need to consider everybody listening and how you sound to them, because that's a really key point of your message, of what you're saying. You know, they haven't got all the other cues around you. They can't read your lips as well, all those kind of things. So hot on sound, well, I am personally. Maybe that's my radio experience too. The other thing I think you should do, and I know that Tudor will agree with me here, is get help if you are running bigger sessions. So if you've got more than 10 to 15 people online, you need to have somebody around you. If you're hosting it and talking, have like a little facilitator person who can help you too, because they can then manage the chat functions, they can deal with anything interactive issues, they can give tech support to someone who's struggling to get on, so you don't have people sitting in a waiting room because you're presenting and they can't get on. Now, I said I wouldn't talk for too long, so I am about to finish. But before I do, I want to say to you, have fun with this. Enjoy it. It is about connecting with people in the only way that we currently can, but also in a really effective way. It avoids travel and commuting, and it keeps things greener, and we're not out driving to all our meetings. So make it fun and see the positivity of it. People do business with people they like, so they need to like you online. They want to what you want to do is, I want to meet that person, they're brilliant, that would be great, I want to work with them. And if you're sort of doing this as a begrudging, oh God, we've got to do this meeting digitally, bloody COVID, I hate this, that is not going to inspire your audience. You need to treat these as like a whoa, booyah, as the American Marines say, let's do this event, and that will bring the people with you. Now, a parent said on Twitter the other day, which kind of distressed me actually, that the teachers at her children's school are really annoyed, really peed off that they're having to do Zoom lessons, because they say, well, you know, it's such hard work and I hate it and the kids don't like it. And I think, well, it's hardly surprising with that attitude. But, you know, if the teacher was actually making a massive effort and planning it, keeping the lessons and the messages tight, entertaining, full of stories, then the students would undoubtedly enjoy it. Now, you're talking to grown-ups in business. You know, this is an audience that is a lot nicer, a lot more engaged, a lot more willing to learn than, you know, a bunch of grumpy adolescents. Don't know if you just heard the door slam as my grumpy adolescent run out of house. This is yours to use, this video presenting, so make the most of it. That's me, finished.
Fantastic, Claire. Nice and energetic. I like that. Round of applause.
Potentially you don't need to go, that's me, finished at the end, but you know, if you have
That's
no
what they do on ITN, isn't it?
That's what they do on ITN.
Yeah. I was wondering when you like listen to documentaries or narrators on TV program, they tend to have like a bit of their voice goes in a particular flow. Like it might go up at the end, or it might go out, or like David Attenborough, for example. And here I'm that's a dog, and it goes up. Do you know? Is there like sort of, I guess it must depend on what you're talking about, what kind of subject matter it is. But you know, like inside secret, is there any kind of like formula about the way that you should...
Well, I mean, I know that all these people, like actors and people, they will massively rehearse and practice and listen to themselves and see if maybe the style that they were using is going to work. You know, they'll be thinking, I want to say this, I want to get this message, I want to say this Shakespearean word or sentence in a way that people are going to get it. That's why they adjust it. And we do it in natural speech with people. We go up and down and the way we talk. But what we get a bit monotonous on a presentation, because it's a bit more scripted and you can just read it. And you can tell if someone's reading it, it will go flatter and flatter and flatter. If you think when you read aloud, when your children read aloud, but then when you're trying to get your child interested in reading and you read to your child, you will go up and down and you will give funny voices to the characters in the book. And that is because you are consciously trying to get your child to love the story, love the book, want you to be reading to them. So it's the same kind of thing that you would do if you're talking to a group of people. I want you all to have taken in what I said and have learned from it and move on from it, and in the long term thing have a positive view of me and all that kind of thing, because that's why we do what we do. It is much easier if I'm using every technique in the book to get you to do that. Now, a lot of it's become instinctive after years of doing it, but it's also, you have to put the energy in and the performance in, so that at the end of this you're going, yeah, I got what she was saying, and you're going to get it much more if I've reinforced all the right sentences and words. And you know, it is about bringing yourself, and maybe think about who you'd be talking to really explain something. You would go a little bit more. I mean, my children call it extra and showy offy. It's really annoying if they hear me presenting. They go, oh God, Mum, so extra. And I was like, because I wouldn't get anyone to engage with me if I went on and just went, so what you really need to do is, like, you know, get everyone to engage with you by livening up your content, because you just wouldn't get it. So it is a bit of forcing that kind of,
making it a bit more exciting.
Clare on Coke, kind of, Clare on lots of Prosecco to the meetings, because otherwise that's, you need to bring them to, because it's also flat and dead, isn't it? We're all in this empty room. And someone said to me yesterday, I feel like such a Burke talking to a picture of myself, and it makes me kind of go, oh God, I'm really old, I'm really fat, I can see my wrinkles, and it's just everyone else is going to feel like that too.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's when you're, it's like when you're on the phone as well, isn't it? When you, I used to work in a telephone-based sales environment, as a lot of you may have as well, and you kind of encourage people to kind of overemphasize and gesticulate and things like that, you know, just to get the blood flow going. But it's different, I guess. Over the video, you have one more sense given to you, don't you?
Yeah.
But you still need to overemphasize.
I really think you do, because it's never going to be as full on as you think it is. And obviously certain personalities would have to rein it in a little bit, because they might be so full on in real life.
Cash is gone now.
Who's gone?
Cash has gone now, but yeah.
Cash is gone. But you know what I mean? And it is, if you are naturally quite an understated, calm, quiet person, a lot of that is lost on the video, because the stuff that, like, the sort of the humor that you might deliver stuff with, and the wry looks and all of that kind of thing, and the little jokey, you know, sort of breaking the fourth wall, looking at the audience kind of thing, that gets lost online because it's really dead. So you have to bump it up. You do have to. So I say to some people, like, run up and down the stairs for a few minutes, obviously stop, get your breath back, but that will have got the blood flow, so that when you talk, you're a little bit more urgent and engaged. And of course, got to be another word for engaged. I'm bored of it.
Yeah, to back that up as well to a very system, because I think I find, and this is a business thing as well, for whatever reason, we don't like to bring emotion into business. Like, we kind of get all business very serious. Like, so now it has to be delivered in a kind of really serious voice, and it kind of gets monotone. And then you get the same person who walk away from a meeting and go into a bar and meet a friend of theirs, and all of a sudden they're animated and they're doing all the things you're talking about, raising the voice, lowering the voice. So I think for me, a lot of it is about just letting yourself find an appropriate emotion that you can bring in. And if you're connected emotionally to what you're talking about, a lot of that stuff fixes itself. A lot of that kind of, you will just on it. Somebody's asked a question, actually, Dominic's asked a question about elements that make a good story. So I'm just going to talk very quickly about that, if that's all right. Sorry to,
yeah, go for it.
So just a couple of key elements for a good story that sort of light up a story. So, you know, story has a structure, beginning, middle, and end. You know, so the beginning, you should be setting up who the character is. In the middle, something happens. And then in the end, you know, life after that incident that happened is like this. So basically, every story is a beginning, middle, and end. Make sure your stories have that structure. and that you have interesting characters. And the best way to have interesting characters is just put dialogue in them. So in other words, you don't need to sit down and write out a story for business. You've got them in your head. Just say them, and then think, how could I bring the character out? So if it's a story of you going in for a coffee into a Starbucks on a Tuesday afternoon, bring in some dialogue. Don't say, I asked the person for a coffee. I walked up the bar, give me a coffee, please. What kind of coffee you want? And all of a sudden now we've got two characters. I'd like a small one. Can you be a bit more specific? I'm busy here. Give me one of those black ones. That's not good enough. And all of a sudden you've got dialogue, and now we've got two characters. You don't need to give any backflow on the characters because we'll build it all out. So the things I say to people: make sure it's got a beginning, middle, and end, and put in a character, and then make sure you have your two key events. There's always a trigger event and a climax. And your trigger event, keep it simple, is the time, it's the thing why the story is being told, is how the story kicks off and it introduces the conflict. So, in other words, I go into a coffee, there is no conflict in the coffee shop. Only as soon as I start asking and he's giving me, that's not good enough, I need more details here. Maybe I've never ordered a coffee before or whatever, for whatever reason, I can't describe it. But the conflict is then me trying to order a coffee with a guy that has no time to take orders for coffee. That's my trigger event. And then it'll go on, I'll get a coffee at the end of it. That's the climax, and maybe it'll be the greatest coffee I ever had. They're simple little things, but if anybody wants to email me, I've got a small little booklet I can send you that it has a little tool in it that helps you make sure you've got those key events in it.
That's what I was going to ask actually. When so for example, when creating your business story, because people do like a good, I started off, I was on the streets and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And sorry if anyone offended anyone. But when I think about, like, when somebody says, somebody did say to me actually, what's your kind of story then? And I'm like, crikey, like, where do I start? Like, where do you start when you're writing a story? Because so much in a business, well, in life, isn't it? So much happens.
Yeah.
Where would you?
Sorry. I was just going to say quickly, a story, like we use the word story and everyone thinks, oh, I've got to tell a story. But sometimes a story is, even what Cash did, that is a story, because he used an example of a client to tell the story. And that's what you're doing. When everyone's going, tell me stories, that is what they're meaning. I worked with somebody the other day who told me he feels sick when he goes to do presentations. That's the story, because that's, as Padraig says, you're then going, that's the story. And then the climax is going to be, so I worked with him for an hour and he was really confident. I mean, that's a really basic one, but that's essentially it. So your story can be as simple as that when we use them. Isn't that right, Padraig?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you might be touching on as well, Tudor, is the big story versus the little story. So there's those everyday anecdotes, and we do them all the time. The big story is where you're trying to find meaning in it. You're trying to find, like I say, it's your what are we about kind of story. There you need to consider. They're about getting clarity, and there is an awful lot of cloudy, noisy stuff around everybody in business. So your ability to get a bit of clarity. Cash, you need to go or something, do you? You're going.
No, the wife's just ordered fried chicken, and it absolutely smells delicious. So whilst I'm concentrating on what you're saying, which is fantastic, I've also got the waft of this like fried chicken in my nose, and it's like 8:30 in the evening. I've been on the phone at since 7:30 this morning, so it's a bit distracting to say the least. But no, please continue. Sorry, I do apologise.
Go for it.
Yes,
no, but I just want to say on that point, Tudor, there's another point, right? When you tell a story, the way the person directed that question, what's your story? There was no narrative to that. It was very direct. It almost felt aggressive. But if you said, Tudor, you seem like a really interesting guy. I bet you've got a really interesting story to tell. What chapter would you say you're in your story right now? So the way you create the narrative about asking the question around the story is also important, because then also that feels like, oh, this person's interested. He can see I've got a lot of grey hairs, and I wear glasses, so I'm probably getting on in years. I've clearly got a lot of background behind me. So what chapter are you in? And you go, Cash, that's a great question. I'll tell you where I'm at. And then that would precede it. So it's important to create the narrative when you're asking a question about the story, I would add.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's what journalists do. They ask quite a nasty question. And I'm always saying to people, if they're going in to talk to a journalist, just rewrite the question in your head, not do a politician and ignore it, but think, A question like, so what's your story, is the same as, oh, tell me about yourself. That's all it is, really. So it's, try and hear the nicer, simpler, easier to answer question.
Yeah.
But I think your question too is, well, what is the story I tell? And sometimes that is your kind of origin story, or like I tell people, look for the most interesting story about your business, because sometimes it's your origin story, how you were set up, but sometimes it's what the product does for a customer, or sometimes it's none of those. It's you know, I met a guy a couple of months back, and I said, so what business are you in? He says, oh, I make boards. You make what? Chopping boards. Oh, well, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be interesting. And I said, oh, really? Oh, okay. So how much? Like, are they, you know, how much do you sell your chopping boards for? Oh, usually between 1,500 and 5,000. I'm thinking, a chopping board? He goes, yeah. And I said, now I want to know. You know, now I want to know more about this. Anyway, it turns out his chopping boards are made from maple wood, and a tree has to die. A tree has to fall over. You can't chop a maple wood. So the interesting fact was, you know, his resource that he uses to make his chopping boards is really limited, and also he's an artist. He doesn't. Each one of these chopping boards is handcrafted. And then he went on to tell me that Jonathan Sexton has one. Alex Ferguson has one of his chopping boards. And all of a sudden, I'm like, dude, you're not in the chopping board business. You know, you're here. You know, these are works of art. I'm pretty sure Jonathan Sexton or Alex Ferguson are not chopping fish on your board if it was $5,000. And so, but it's just interesting. His story was, the interesting part of his story was his product and where it was sourced. And that's interesting. And he had like, he would give you the history of the tree. And so in that case, it's that. But sometimes there was another guy, I know I'm going on a bit, but I'll be very quick. Another guy I did a program with, and he started to tell a story. He was doing branded shoe wear for certain type, for football clubs. You could get a club, football would say with Man United. They didn't have the boots. They had the gear, they had the shorts. This guy came up with, I'll make the boots and I'll get them branded. The idea is not brilliant. It doesn't get you overly excited to go, that's not it. But then when he started to talk, I discovered this was an out-of-work laborer that didn't finish school. He never used a computer. And he got laid off. He had 3 kids, 3 boys. They always out playing football. He couldn't afford to buy clothes for them, never mind football boots or whatever else. And he just came up with this idea. And he called a mate of his who came around to the house, went up to the attic because his father-in-law had given a computer gift to his wife, got this computer down, helped him set it up, show him how to use it, told him how to get onto Google, told him how to search, and let him off. And this guy learned how to set up a business, started. Next minute, boom, he's launched his business, and he has a contract to franchise with some major football club. Now, what's interesting there? That's the story. There is a guy who's down and out, no kind of, not much going for him, but took the initiative, took a chance, because he was driven by, I'm not having my boys walking around not getting what they need just to play football. And so it's a really highly emotive story. So the story, like for founders or running a business, it's not all, people say, oh, get your why story. Sometimes it is your why story, but sometimes it's not. So finding the story that's most interesting. I'll tell you where the source to that. I'm telling another story, and then I definitely will shut up. But I was at dinner one evening, and just as I put a mouthful of food into my mouth, the person opposite me said, so tell me, your business, you're the core story. Are you like a PR agency? I literally had a mouthful in my mouth. And sitting beside this lady was another lady who ran a PR agency, but was a PR agency that we've done some work with. And she said, oh, I'll answer that, Padraig, because I was chewing my food. And she said, no, Padraig, what you got to understand about Padraig's business is he's kind of the opposite of PR. In PR, we come up with stories and we make stories how to look good, and we try. Yeah, we do reputation management and all that, but we kind of fabricate stories a lot. What he's about is authentic storytelling. He's about getting to the story that exists out of. And I just heard this description. It's a description I never used. But my point is sometimes the best people to get your story is other people, not you. Go and ask other people, clients, people you work with, friends, how would you describe what I do? What do you think is the most interesting aspect of our business or what I do? And sometimes you'd be really surprised. How would you describe our business to somebody else? And then you hear these things, you never have heard them before. But they probably are the engaging thing.
That's true. I always say to people, don't tell people what you do, tell people Like, instead of like, I do this, I am an event host, you're supposed to be saying, I help people put on events and I'm the person who stands on stage, because you're telling a story, they start to imagine it straight away. Whereas that's what people are asking for when they say, what's your story? Essentially, they're asking, what's the story of what you do or who you are, as opposed to, you know, I am a recruiter. You know, that's not your story. So, yeah.
What do you, what's your, I guess the kind of reason behind it and what you help to solve?
You just turn all of that into a story, don't you?
I guess bringing mini case studies into it would,
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. When you watch on the news, for example, like a news feature, when they'll have the person in the newsroom saying, and you know, the fighting in Syria has increased, and there are so many thousands of people who've now been made homeless. They then, and our Jonathan so and so in Syria reports, and then they go to Jonathan. Jonathan is normally going to start his piece with a picture of a family, and they're in trouble, they're struggling, and they're the story, they're the little microcosm of the piece that makes you connect with them straight away, because then it starts to mean something to you, because he's telling the story of one person, which becomes the story of everybody, and that's the case study. So even when it's down to something like a charity calls us and says, I want to do something about heart disease, can you get something on the news about heart disease? We'll say, we need the case study. We need a bloke with heart disease to talk to us and tell us his story, because that's what the audience is going to engage with. They're not just going to engage with loads of facts and figures. You want to see John with heart disease struggling to get about his day, and you want to so that you get him, you understand his story, because his story is the bigger then translates to the bigger picture, which is that we don't have, I don't know, enough facilities for him in the UK, or that they're struggling because of COVID or whatever. And those are the way you get it with when, you know, we're all being told that now. When you talk to a client, they'll go, tell me about the people you help. They want you to give examples that will be like them. Then they'll picture themselves being helped by you.
That's interesting. Yeah. Other people's perspective as well, I guess, is like somebody else.
Bradley's just said, because there's that's really interesting as well, because sometimes people don't know what you do. You know, when you go, I've bloody met this person about 20 times, I've told them what I flipping do, and they still don't get it. That's your fault, my fault, because we haven't told a story about what we do. So we've just, you know, I always find it in LinkedIn, people label who they are rather than who they help. And it's much easier for people to understand what you do by who you help than you just telling them your CV.
Have you got to like sell them? It's almost like you sell them the cake rather than the ingredients. Is that what you?
That's an ingenious idea.
That's ingenious. That's a great analogy.
I just had an idea. Yeah, I might use that. Yeah, no, brilliant. That I find it really interesting. I think the both of your kind of sessions have worked really, really well together, because you're all about kind of engaging people and telling a story and making just life a little bit more exciting. And
Cash is off for his chicken.
Oh, he's off. He's off.
Gone.
That's a true story. Yeah. Yeah, but no, I find that fascinating. I think I'm going to go back and rewrite my website now and think of my my business story. But I think as well, like, you know, having a nice catchy story, like a bit of an elevator pitch, when people say, you know, what do you do? And it's almost like you are in an elevator, isn't it? And you go, you know, you've got a very short period of time to tell that story, but make it punchy so they remember you as well.
The shy part of us does just want to go, I'm in recruitment, I'm in it, because we don't want to sound like a bit of a wanker going, well, I help people solve all their problems. You know, when you do meet people who go, I'm a problem solver, you think you're a cock, actually, because that's not your story. You know, you just, sorry. You do just.
I just got to change my business card now, actually. Yeah. I'm just going to put cock on it. Thanks for the advice.
Someone else put that on there, didn't
I
they?
used to be a problem solver.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
someone called me a cock, and now I'm just that.
I used to work with a guy. Actually, he was a financial director, and anytime he'd be at weddings or anything, he always he used to dread it. People go, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I work in finance," and like literally they'd turn around and face the other way. You know, they'd find somebody else. But he came up with this idea. He just reminded me, Clare. He came up with when people ask him, "So what do you do?" He go, "I'm a fortune teller." And they go, "Oh my God, you're a fortune teller. Like, what do you do? Do you read palms?" And no, I'm a business fortune teller. I read the last 3 year, the last 3 years reports, and I'll project the next 3 year financial report. But it's quite funny. Just by using that line, he would get them at least into a conversation.
That's exactly what you're doing. So that's all we want to do: people to talk to us, people to. Yeah, I mean, Bradley said here, what makes you decide to work with us? And when he asked people that, it's a really effective way of people work with you. But it is hard sometimes to pinpoint down your own story. As he says, you have to ask other people sometimes what they describe you as.
Yeah. Well, next time when we introduce ourselves in the chat at the next webinar, we'll be seeing like mini stories, won't we?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to amend mine now. Actually. Oh.
Or maybe force other people to write our profiles. That might be one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good one. Yeah, that would help. Any other questions, guys? I'm aware that we've overrun again, but that's a good sign, I think, because we've had some nice chats. Anything from anyone? No?
My glasses on to read the chat.
I think we're okay. Yeah, no, that's good.
All good.
Thank you so much for that, Claire and Padraig. That was really, really interesting. I think the 2 sessions worked really well.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Padraig, as well.
And likewise, Claire. Lovely to see you. We should do this more often.
Yeah, exactly. Next Wednesday.
Yeah, see you yes. All right, see you next Wednesday, Claire. Next Wednesday.
Bye, guys.
Have another panel coming up, Claire. So maybe we'll have.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk.
We do have a special guest coming up as well, don't we, Charlie? We announced.
We do
today, but we're just working on the story for that, and that will be announced later today. So we're really excited about that. I can't.
Charlie, I have to tell you that on my screen it does look like you are naked.
I know.
I said that, and what response?
Is that like just Judah going?
Charlie, you've gone on to a whole other level of engagement.
Yeah. Judah's using every advertising ploy in the book.
Yeah.
Well, see, when I went on naked, people started complaining. I can't believe it. It's not fair.
A good way to get attention.
Yeah, we'll do anything. Yes,
right.
A special coming up very soon, which we're going to announce later today. We've got a panel on Friday. We've got another session on Wednesday with Rachel Haworth. So lots and lots of juicy things coming up. Hope to see you guys again. Brilliant to see you again. Fantastic.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Claire and
Thanks,
Padraig.
everyone.
If you want to email to the guys, to the attendees today, just get them over to Charlie and she'll do that. There'll be a video going around as well of this.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Is there any chance that, Padraig, you could send that little book that you mentioned to Tudor and he forward it on to people? I don't know if you'd be able
I'll
to
send
do
it
that.
to Charlie now. Actually, I was going to send it to Dominic. He's requested, but I'll just send it to Charlie and you can send it to everybody.
That would be good.
Book might be a slight over-exaggeration. It's more a pamphlet sort of thing, but that's what it says on the thing.
Fable, maybe.
Yeah. I should bring it out as a book. Here's my 4-page book.
It's an ebook. It's what do you call them? You salespeople. It's a lead
magnet.
Lead magnet. That's it.
There you go. Anyway, I'll pop that to. I'll send it to you, Charlie, then instead.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I send it out.
Thank you very much. Lovely to
guys.
Oh, have a great week.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, Claire. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Press the right button.
Oh, that's just me.